Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Part of this video is partially based on memories of some of my family members who worked in Africa, and some of the knowledge that was passed to me from some of the family members and former family members. Some of them worked for just government organizations like universities in Africa. And some of them actually, not just that, they work for intelligence. And specifically, one of my family members, former family members, worked for Bulgarian intelligence. It was my mother's Bulgarian husband. He was an engineer, and in the civil rank, it's called. He never wore a uniform. He had rank of lieutenant colonel, and when he worked in Angola, he was working for Bulgarian intelligence at the time. So it was a long time ago. This was more than 40 years ago. All of them, they're no longer with us. The last person who witnessed stuff in Africa was my mother. She died January last year. So here's the deal. It may be my name for this video. It's kind of interesting. American Lives Matter, and possible African connection from Cold War to attempts of lives of either CIA agent or FBI agent in the United States. So here's this is all about. As I said and I continue repeating it about my father's research and impulse technology and patent that he had. But my mother, 20 years later, with her Bulgarian husband, they worked in Angola, Africa for a while, and the part of the work that she did was actually assisting Cubans, and then she became a professor in Luanda University and so on and so on. She has a PhD in electronics and professor in Salt Lake Community College. And to the end, until they closed the electronics department, she was the head of electronics department. So here's the deal. I do not agree with my mother's death. And it was really, really suspicious to me about several situations that she encountered. And with the recent opening of files about Cold War, and not just Cold War, but situations that happened in the United States and American embassies abroad, people that worked for the embassies, for Justice Department, were hit by impulse technology. And everybody in army knows, I'm talking about high rank, that where is the impulse technology, there is always nuclear weapon research that is going on, okay? So it's like, carrots and peas here in the South. They all go together, okay? And the situation we were talking about, it's something that people simply will not like because it involves race. And in order to understand that, here's the deal. For years after coming to power, Castro, using Soviet money, was sponsoring black groups in the United States. He says that the United States is unfair to the black population and so on and so on. I mean, we know the stuff. So when the war started with South Africa, it's called border war in Namibia, which was fights were from Angola toward Namibia, and South Africa will fight north. And the Soviet Union and Cubans were preparing people to be, well, de facto, let's call them saboteurs, even though they call them freedom fighters and so on, so on, so on, so on. But what was interesting is that the Soviet Union, through Cuba, was de facto dragged into war with South Africa. And they opened a whole massive training center in Crimea next to the city of Jankoy. There was massive military airbase. And this training center was for special operations during Soviet Union era. I don't know what's now there, I have no idea. And what the deal, as I said, is that they were training people in order to do sabotage in South Africa, okay? But at the time, there was a spy program to bring people to Soviet Union at the time, train them, and then send them to the United States when it's possible. And the thing was, actually, Cuba was at the time really easy stuff, because the war with South Africa started in 1966 and went through 1989. So during this period of time, there were young people. Cuba would bring 17 years old people and send them into battle with South Africa, and then bring them back. Okay, so, and the second stage is really simple. If you're Cuban, if you can reach United States, and you automatically granted asylum as soon as you step on American land. So for Cubans it was easier. So people who were trained, war trained, they were battlefield trained people. They would, after returning to Cuba, they were able simply to, by stepping on American soil near Miami, they would get asylum and so on and start new life. They had nice government sponsorship and so on and so on. But nobody talks about people who actually got trained in those in those specific training camps that were aimed to South Africa. Okay. At the time, as I said, the Soviet Union and United States were in Cold War in a way, and they had this issues, and one of those was espionage. And so, in the same as for South Africa, Soviets at the time would simply train people from Africa who were able to come to the Soviet Union. But not just that, there was as I said, this is part of the racial issue. There's a lot of people in the United States that are descendants of slaves, but from specific areas of Africa. So if you look, like take Cameroon, okay? A lot of Cameroon people, they look like African Americans because thousands of slaves were actually brought from Cameroon to the New World. And if you look at Cameroon people and you look to African Americans here, they pretty much, you won't make any difference in look, but they will have, of course, a language issue, but actually language issue is really easy to cover up. I will do one day when a different video, but that's what it is. So they will train saboteurs and so on, but they can come through, after that they can go through Cuba, they can go through just simply through different way, and establishes sleeper cells, okay? So the people who are trained at Soviet camps, after collapse of Soviet Union, in a way they kind of became, I'm sure, like a freelancers or something. There's no governments, to control and so on and so on. So the point here is that if somebody says there is a impulse weapon hit on somebody, and they would look for Russians, or they would look for like Soviets, what the hell knows they were looking for. Then, but they avoid to talk about Africans because it's kind of an uncomfortable topic. You know what I mean? There are people, I'm absolutely sure, were trained on impulse weapons during the 80s. In Angola as well, where my mother worked. My point is very simple. There are people that were related to Africa. There's a possibility that actually they're contractors that use impulse weapons to hit on US officials. Okay? This is first. Okay? Second, you have to establish their age. Because, as I said, Cuba, and they were sending people to Africa when they were 17. So it's 17, 18, 19, 21, 20, 21, this area of age. So it's 40 years later. So at 21, or like, let's put it 17, 18, 90, let's add 40 years. So here we go. We have people about 60, okay? And establish life in the United States. And when they establish life in the United States, as I said, it's like a regular, it can be like a regular sleeper cell. So by ignoring this possibility, maybe using political correctness of race, United States government is wrong. They have to start looking to different levels of possible infiltration of this country. As I said, if you remember, Soviet Union and the United States were foes. They were not on edge all the time. And Soviets used race relations in the United States to try to sabotage the country here. Okay. Ask Angela Davis. She has a Lenin premium. It's called Leninskaya Premia. It was a award for foreign relations.
21 июля 1979 года в Свердловском зале Московского Кремля прошло торжественное собрание, посвященное вручению Международной Ленинской премии за укрепление мира между народами лидеру антивоенного движения и борцу за права негров в США Анджеле Дэвис.
As a leader of one of the leaders of black movement in the United States and leader of Communist Party at the time, Angela Davis, she knows stuff. Castro here is in the black area here in the United States, is at Atlanta. He's really, really well respected because he helped a lot of people by shipping cash from Cuba through Caribbean to New Orleans, and then it would be dispersed along the black groups. And nobody would dare to say where the money came from, because at the time, the connection to communism was treason. And treason was offense punishable by death. So nobody dared to say that they got money from Castro. Some of the cash flow would come to the United States. It was used to sponsor Montessori schools, breakfast, children's breakfast of black people at the time. Well, that, for instance, Soviet Union, they were starting fighting South Africa, not openly. They started later when Cubans joined, a really big deal. But they were setting up networks to fight South African apartheid way even before Martin Luther King started marching. First march of Luther King, if I'm not mistaken, was 1963 to Washington. Well, in 1961, 1962, Soviets at the time, through Denmark, because Danish language, by the way, it's one of the like Afrikaans, part of the Afrikaans language. So they would use through Denmark, because Denmark's and western part of Soviet Union at the time, people from there, they look really similar. They had this, I call it, Baltic look, okay? And they can mingle between the African population, white population of South Africa. And this was, at the time, Soviet Union was setting up a intelligence network over the South Africa. I'm going to stop for today, and I'm going to do it later. Maybe it continues, but my bottom line is very simple. Until FBI start looking in the possibility of African connection from Cold War. I've never been to Africa, but even though my family had massive connection, as I said, my mother worked in Angola with her Bulgarian husband. Then she had, after divorcing her Bulgarian husband, she had some stuff to do in Kenya, in Nairobi. And in general, I said, we're kind of our family connected. It wasn't a war with South Africa, I wouldn't be here in the States, which 36 years already. And as I said, until the FBI look in this type of stuff, they're going to be a problem, okay? Can cost lives.